So now let's explore the last conic section that we will discuss, namely the hyperbola. Now you will notice that the hyperbola has a transverse axis on which your foci and your vertices lie. Now, what is a hyperbola? If we take the distance between a focus and the point on a curve, on one of the branches, and then we take the distance to the other focus and we subtract those, that difference is the same, if you discount the sign, as any other distance, the difference of the distances. So if I take this larger distance minus the smaller distance, that will be the same as this larger distance minus this smaller distance. Now we will only look at hyperbolas that are centered at the origin. And so we could have a horizontal transverse axis where the foci and the vertices lie horizontally. And you'll notice that there are asymptotes. And likewise, down here, we have a vertical transverse axis. How do you know which one you have? If x is first and y is being subtracted, then you have a horizontal transverse axis. So x, you can think horizontal. Y, you can think vertical. And a is again the distance outward in the x direction in this one, and then y has a squared underneath, so it will be the distance upward. Now the easy way to remember it is whatever is under x, that's horizontal distance outward. Whatever is under y, that's vertical distance. And then c is the distance toward the focus. And now, what about your asymptotes? Well, the slope is always going to be rise over run. So you're going to take the denominator's square root over the other denominator's square root. And it's always going to be what's under y divided by what's under x. Take the square roots of those. Let's take a look at an example. So here we know that the center is 0, 0. And x is leading off, so your transverse axis is going to be horizontal. So it's the x-axis, y equals 0. Now, under x is 9 and under y is 16. So we have x squared over 3 squared minus y squared over 4 squared equals 1. So in the x direction, we're going to go to the left and right 3 units. And under the y squared, we have 4 squared. So up and down, we're going to go 4. So let's draw that box. Left and right, 3 units. Up and down, 4 units. If we draw our box, we know that we open so that we're opening on our transverse axis. Well, what we can do to help us out is draw the diagonals of this box. And that will be our asymptotes. So our asymptotes are y equals plus or minus the rise over run. So what's under the y, what's under the x? So 4 over 3 x. So y equals mx. Why not plus b? Well, b is 0 because we're going through 0 on the y-axis. So now we can draw our hyperbola branches. We go through those points on our box on the left and the right, and this is because it opens left and right. We have a horizontal transverse axis, and then we approach our asymptotes. Now we just need our foci. Now, to find our foci, we know from our equation on the previous page c squared equals a squared plus b squared for a hyperbola. And so c squared is going to be the sum of the denominators of our original equation. Now it doesn't matter really which one's which because we're adding. So c squared is going to be 25. So c equals positive or negative 5, but c is a distance, so just 5. And now we go on our transverse axis out 5 units. So our foci are going to be negative 5, 0, and positive 5, 0. Let's look at example 2. Here we have y squared minus 4x squared equals 16. Let's divide everything by 16. So y squared over 16 minus x squared over 4 equals 1. Now this time we lead with y squared, so that means we're going to open up and down. This means our transverse axis is vertical, and it's the x-axis. So our transverse axis is our y-axis, which means that our transverse axis is x equals 0. Now, let's draw our box. Up and down in our y direction, 4 units, and then left and right, 2 units. So we're looking at the square roots of 16 and 4. So 4 units left, 4 units right, up 2 units, down 2 units. And draw our rectangle. And now we know that we can draw our diagonals of that rectangle to come up with our asymptotes. And so the asymptotes are y equals positive or negative. Look at the denominators. It's the y over the x. So 4 over 2, because we're looking at the square roots, and 4 over 2 is the coefficient of our x. It's the slope. But we don't write 4 over 2. That's just 2x. So those are our asymptotes. We have our transverse axis. Now what about our vertices? Our vertices lie on our transverse axis. So they're these points, 0, 2, and 0, negative 2. And now we need our foci. But c squared equals a squared plus b squared means that c squared is 16 plus 4. So c squared equals 20. Now that means that c is going to be the square root of 20. We don't have to worry about the negative, but we do have to simplify that radical. So 2 root 5. And it's going to be on the same transverse axis as what we've seen. So that's about 4 point something. It's about 4.5. So there's the focus, negative 4.5. So our foci are 0, negative 2 root 5 and 0, positive 2 root 5. So let's sketch what we've been given in this example to find its equation. So we have a center of 0, 0. Now the vertex is at 2, 0. That means that the other vertex is at negative 2, 0. So, and that's because of symmetry. That means that we're opening left and right. So we automatically know that we have x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared equals 1. Now, what's a? It's the distance to those vertices from the center. So A equals 2. So this means x squared over 2 squared minus y squared over b squared equals 1. Well, what is B? Well, the focus resides at 3, 0. At least one of them does. That means that the other one's at negative 3, 0. But what's the distance between the center and the focus? That's C. So C equals 3. And we know that C squared equals A squared plus B squared. But this means that we have 3 squared equals 2 squared plus B squared. So this is 9 equals 4 plus B squared. Or 5 equals B squared. So we have x squared over 4 minus y squared over, now what's B? Well, I don't care necessarily what B is. B squared is 5. So B squared is my denominator. So y squared over 5, that's equal to 1.